with a knife video for you, and today we've got something pretty cool to take a look at. Now, lots and lots of videos have been done on the Koenig Arius. I want to talk about why specifically I wanted one in the channel, why so many people are after these right now, and perhaps explain to you what it is that makes these knives stand out among all of the different options that are out there vying for our hard-earned knife dollars. The one thing I will say is if you want one of these are a little tough to come by right now. Especially if there's a specific one you wanted. So this one is pretty much exactly what I was looking for, and because of that, it took me a long time to get my hands on one. Also, I don't want one of the super fancy high-end versions, and those tend to come up for sale a little more often. Perhaps people find they've sunk a little too much into that knife and therefore want to move them. Anyway, if you really, really want one of these, I would recommend you go and check out and perhaps even join the Koenig Knives fan page over on Facebook, or the buy, sell, trade page, which is, I think, run by the same admins. I will put a link to the Koenig Knives fan page, and there at least you can learn a lot more about these knives. You can see what other enthusiasts are talking about, and if you want to, go from there, you can find from that page a link to the buy, sell, trade page, and that's probably right now your best bet for finding one of these on the secondary market. They don't come up for sale very often on blade forums, and if they do, they're gone almost immediately. Of course, my favorite knife Facebook page is Canadian Knife and Gear, and again, I've seen a couple come along over there, but they're pretty rare, and so you'll be watching for a long time before you're able to buy one out anywhere else but the buy, sell, and trade page associated specifically with Koenig knives. That's actually where I ended up getting this one, and I'm pretty stoked about it. So let's go ahead and tell you guys what we've got here first of all. So this is the plain titanium version. I was pretty determined to pick one of those up. I want this to be a knife that I can use and carry, so I don't want a lot of fancy stuff going on. This is milled out. So that's one of the things I was kind of hoping. I would have bought this if it didn't have the milling, but I was hoping to maybe pick one up that had that milling to save some weight. The build date on this guy was the end of last year, so December 2018. It's CTSX HP steel, meaning this is a Gen 2, probably like the latest of the Gen 2s. In terms of size and weight on this, if you're not familiar at all with the Koenig Arius, this is 8 and 9/16 overall. The blade length is 3.5 inches, 5 and 1/16 handle. Great big grip area here, 4 and 1/8 inches. So you can see there's quite a bit of handle left sticking past my fingers. So even if I had even larger hands than this would still work out just fine. And with the milling to save the weight there, this guy weighs in at 5 ounces, which means the non-milled out version is going to weigh 5.5 or something like that. It's going to be just a little bit heavier. All right, now look, why are these in such high demand? Why are they so hard to find, and why did I want to put one in the collection? One of the things I'm trying to do right now is sort of build a bit of a core collection between 10 and 20 knives, and kind of keep it to that level. I don't know how successful I'll be at that, but that's at least the goal that I'm aiming for. And I want this knife to be part of that core collection for a couple of reasons. One, it's highly enjoyable for me as a knife enthusiast to own this and carry it and flip it. It's fantastic. But the other thing is, I consider this to be one of the best examples of a production folding knife available on the market right now. These are truly just a near perfect execution of a folding knife. All right, it's a TJ Schwartz design. He's done a great job on this. He's done some other good designs. He's a really, really skilled guy. These are built at Koenig Knives. They used to be built, when they first came out, they were built by Millet Knives. Fairly quickly, Bill Koenig established his own business and started making these himself, and that's how they currently stand, and they are doing a phenomenal job. They really are. Now, they're working on a production run right now. I was messaging back and forth with their social media guy, and having a discussion about the fact that there's not a lot of availability. And he pointed out that they are, some of these will be showing up at retailers fairly soon. So what I'm going to do is put a link to DLT Trading in the description box. They're one of the approved retailers for these. And if you're looking to buy one brand new retail, that's probably a really good place to check. All right. You can, I think they're still doing this. I could be wrong. I think you can buy them directly from the website, but I'm sure they have commitments to their retailers that they probably have to fulfill first. So if you're really, really antsy to get one, I would look at retailers first. The other thing is on that Koenig Knives fan page that I mentioned earlier, a lot of guys are watching. And so when a retailer does get some stuff in stock, there'll be a post on that page letting people know about it. So there you go. Now, what I would recommend for most people is to probably do what I did. I looked on the secondary market. I knew that was my plan for a lot of these higher end pieces. That's going to be my approach, just because you're saving yourself a bit of money, and that is, I think, is important when you're looking to buy a knife at this level. And the other benefit is a knife that costs this much. Many people who own them are not using them and carrying them and beating them up. They get babied quite a bit, and because of that, you can end up with a knife that is almost like brand new and yet save yourself, a good amount off, 15, 20%, something like that from retail. So now we're finally kind of getting to the point where why I've already pointed out, I think this belongs on a very, very short list of some of the best folding knives that are out there. And I would include this beside something like the Holt Spectre, which is fantastic. Another knife that is just truly amazing in terms of its functionality and its execution and its build quality. Many things from Shirogorov, especially the F95, the F3. And of course, people are raving now about the Neon Zero, but all of that would be a very short list of just some of the best knives. I think the Grimsmo Rask would belong on this list as well, although the ergonomics on the Rask are perhaps not as excellent as some of those other examples I've just given you, but the action certainly is. The detail and quality that Grimsmo is hitting in terms of their construction and the way they're putting everything together is insane. Okay, so having that, so that's one of the main reasons, is that I feel like this is just a perfectly executed knife. And let's go into some of the details so I can kind of explain further what it is that I mean by that. When I generate that list, right, where does that list come from? Okay. And so, by the way, one other point before we leave that off. This is easily, as I said, comparable to those super high-end knives, but the cost is not there, right? So the base price for a Holt Spectre these days is $700. As you guys know, the base price for a Grimsmo Rask is $900. A base Shiro, the F3 in LMAX is going to run you about $700. Okay, but you can pick up one of these for brand new 525, the very most basic model. Now, if you start adding a few little extras, I know they get up there very quickly, and there are tons of Ariuses out there that are selling for the same price as Holts and Shiros and Grimsmos. Okay, that's for sure true. But you can still get into one of these for 525, which is not all that bad. And if you look on the secondary market, you can be between $400 and $500, which is pretty much the sweet spot for me. That's about where I tap out when it comes to how much money I'm willing to invest in a knife. I have a couple of knives I know that break that rule a little bit, and some of you love pointing that out. But I try, and oftentimes what happens is when I've reached outside of that comfort level, I end up not feeling justified in keeping the knife, and I end up selling them. So this knife, at the price I paid, I feel pretty good about owning and keeping and using. And it's just a matter of comfort level. Some guys will feel comfortable owning and beating up on a $1,500 knife. Okay, that's not me, and all of you viewing this will land somewhere else on that spectrum. Okay, that's just part of the deal. So now, let me get into some of the specifics of this knife. So we've got CTS XHP blade here with a media blasted primary bevel and a satin finish on the flats. And here's where the perfection really starts. So CTS XHP is a steel that I absolutely love. I find it to be just one of the most balanced steels out there in terms of, how long it holds an edge, in terms of how hard it is to sharpen. I just find this performs in a really idyllic way. Okay. is it better than M390 or 20CV? No, probably not, but I do find it a little easier to sharpen. Certainly, if you compare this to, say, S35VN or S30V, I find it sharpens like S35VN, but holds an edge like S30V, which I find S30V is a little harder, holds an edge a little better. I'm not getting into all the science of blade steel, guys. That's just not my bailiwick. Um, I speak from experience here. Okay, so when I sharpen a knife, you get to learn how that knife feels on stones, and then how it feels over time as you use it, and how well it holds an edge. And CTS XHP has always been an absolute standout for me. If you really want to get into some of those details, Blade Banter does a great job. Go over and watch his channel, and I think you'll enjoy it. And he can fill in some of those blanks about carbides and chemistry and all of that metallurgists or those who are just into that aspect of the hobby really, really care about. Now, so blade steel is fantastic. Now, the other thing that's fantastic is the grind. So if you look at this blade, it's a fairly substantial blade stock. It's certainly not what you would call a thin blade stock, and the grind itself is extremely well balanced. So it thickens up here at the tip a little bit, which is going to give you some more strength and durability. But all through here, right up until you come to this belly, it is very, very thin. And you can see, now we've talked about this before, a really thin secondary bevel like this usually, okay, usually means that the knife is very thin behind the edge, and that's exactly what it means here. This knife is fantastic for the fact that while the blade is still substantial and it's still confidence inspiring, it is nice and thin behind that edge, so that this slices, if you're cutting up a bunch of apple slices for your kids, or cutting potatoes for a soup or a stew, or I mean, just to boil in water and eat, whatever. This knife will slice those things up like a demon. It'll eat through cardboard like it doesn't even exist. Okay, it's a great, great slicey blade, and yet you're not having to sacrifice that extra durability that comes from a little bit of extra material there. So the blade is, again, perfect. It is one of the most perfectly balanced blades that exists. I would compare this very, very easily to something like an Inkosi, which again, I feel like is an extremely, nearly perfectly balanced blade. Okay. So that's the first thing. The blade is fantastic. Next up is the action. Okay. And the action on this knife is, again, just exactly what you want it to be. It's smooth. You can spidey flick it. It flips really well and with authority. It's nice and drop shutty. The lock bar is extremely accessible, and just, it functions like pushing a button. It really does. So, it just, everything clicks into place. Everything moves the way you want it to, when you want it to. And that's what I'm looking for in a good knife action. And these really, really deliver that in spades. So the action is really, really nice. About the only sort of wish that I could bring up along these lines is it is on bearings. And I've often talked about the fact that something that is on washers over bearings is going to be a little more versatile, a little more durable. Not that it's the end of the world. You can easily blow out and clean out bearings. If you have to, you can take the whole knife apart, and these do come apart very, very easily. So yeah, pop this thing apart, clean everything out. I certainly did that when I first got this one. That's one thing I will say. If you're buying anything on the secondary market, it's probably going to be necessary, or let's say this, it's more likely to be necessary that you take it apart and clean it up. All right. Especially if it's been riding around in somebody's pocket for a long time, there's lint, there's everything else. It could still be in perfect condition. It just needs, a little bit of TLC before it's going to run at its optimal level. And if you want to keep it for yourself running at its optimal level, again, you're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to take it apart. You're going to have to clean everything out once in a while. That's just kind of the nature of a bearing pivot system. Okay, doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, I like bearing pivots a lot. It's just part of the deal. And as I say, other people have pointed this out as well. You can often get great performance just by blowing these out and achieve very close to the same results that way. But I think for people who are really anal like I am, you're going to have to take it apart. All right, let's move on to the ergonomics, because again, this is exceptional. It just molds into your hand. It really feels like this is meant to be in a human hand. It feels so, so comfortable. And you know, what helps with that, of course, is the contouring on the G10, the overall thickness, the fact that everything is nicely chamfered and angled. There's no hot spots. There's a bit of a ramp here. There's a nice choil there for your finger. So yeah, this just fits beautifully in the human hand. It really, really does, like it was just meant to be. And so when you put those things together, what really more could you ask from a folding knife? The ergonomics are outstanding. The action is enjoyable. It's easy and it's fun to fidget with. And the blade is a perfectly balanced overall blade. All right. Finally, you still get an extremely attractive knife. This knife is absolutely beautiful, both open and closed. It's just a gorgeous looking knife. And so for all of those reasons, I really, really like this. And I wanted to have one in the collection because then, and that's the last point here. When a knife does all those things so well, it becomes a great representative excuse me, guys, it becomes a great representative of what we want to see from a folding knife. So now I can say, hey, this knife has good action, you know, fill in the blank with any other knife I happen to be reviewing. Is it as good as the Arius, right? It gives you a standard to work to. It gives you a level of expectation that you go, this is really, really good. So everything else, you know, how does it measure up? How does it stack up? All right. So having said all of that, let's get some comparisons here because there are some knives that I think I want to throw in here. A couple I just want to throw in for familiarity. So there's the Rat Model 1. Everyone is familiar with that, and you can see that these are very, very close in size, being within like a 1/16 of an inch of one another. And there, of course, is the Para 2. Again, just a little bit smaller on the Para 2, the overall size, only 1/4 of an inch. But those are knives I think everyone is used to. Now, the next two knives I want to bring in are going to be knives that I feel like hold a similar place, that go on the short list of the very best folding knives that are available out there. The first one is going to be the Inkosi. Now, the Inkosi, as many of you know, is more on the harder use end of the spectrum. This is, you know, the standard version, the 21, or now the 31, I guess. Is sort of the EDC style, and then this is supposed to be for harder use, maybe for tactical purposes, whatever the case may be. And so to me, the Inkosi is a little more appealing. By the way, with these inlays, it does feel great in hand. Both of these, again, beautiful knives, very well balanced, okay? And that's the point that I want to make. The thing that really draws me to a knife is when I feel like it's just really well suited to lots of different roles, and just everything is executed with a level of thoughtfulness and a level of perfection. And that's what really excites me about these, okay? And by the way, these would be similar in price because of the micarta. If you were to just do a plain Inkosi, I think you'd be about $100 less. Let's grab another knife, and I've got one last Wildcard that I think needs to be brought in here, but this one is going to be, again, a knife that everyone is familiar with, Hinderer XM18. Now, recently, of course, the Hinderer XM18 has come out in 6th gen that has the tri-way pivot. So that is, you can pop this open and switch out what you've got in here for a pivot from bearings to washers, phosphor bronze washers, or Teflon washers. Now, this one is riding on Teflon. I switched out the Teflon on my old XM18, and I don't know, the action on this is very nice, so I don't want to mess with it, but I may switch this out for phosphor bronze as well. We'll see what happens. But again, you could probably do a whole video discussion, but what I'm going to do is wait. I will at some point in the not too distant future pick up a Gen 6 Hinderer just to see what they're like. And when I do that, I'll do a full comparison video between the two knives, okay? The Hinderer is going to be a little more on the harder use end of the spectrum. You know, if there's a scale, you know, the Hinderer is going to land closer to hard use, and this is going to land a little closer to EDC. But nonetheless, I still think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. All right, there's one knife that I want to bring in that I think should be considered. And this knife is the Riot Knives Torrent. I love this knife. It does all of the things that I want a high-end knife to do. The action is spectacular. The construction is fantastic. The level of, detail and just this knife gets a lot of things really, really right. Now, the reason I bring it in is because there's going to be somebody watching this who goes, okay, Kevin, I'm glad the Arius is nice. Even a used one, even if you go to a Gen 2 or a Gen 1, it's still pretty up there in terms of price point. Okay. I want as close to that as I can get, but can you recommend me something that's maybe close but not quite there? And this is what I would recommend. This is the one of the nicest pieces from Riot. The action is spectacular. The detent is spectacular. Blade steel is M390. Now, this blade is not going to be quite as well balanced. This one's going to slice a little bit better, and this is going to feel just a little nicer in hand. But otherwise, these are very, very close in terms of quality and fit and finish and what they deliver. And so I've said this over and over again. If you really want to experience the closest thing to just perfection in a folding knife, Riot is building exceptional things. They really, really are. So let's get that guy out of the way and get back to our main discussion, which is why is this thing so awesome? Now we've kind of really gone over, and I hope those comparisons clarify some of the things that I was saying about this knife in the beginning. This really, really does a lot of things very well. So what is my overall take on this knife? I would say this: if you are looking, and I get a lot of messages from people who, they go, Kevin, I really want, this knife or that knife. And I've told a lot of them, okay, a lot, that if I had that kind of money to spend, if I had $450, let's say we're going to land happily between $400 and $500. So if I had $450 and I wanted to spend that on the best possible thing that I could, okay, that's going to deliver something truly special and truly exceptional, I would be looking hard at a Koenig Arius. I know they can be hard to get your hands on. I get that, but I think, almost anything that's really well done is going to be hard to get your hands on because people are going to figure out that they're really well done, okay? And so if I had that kind of money to spend, I would be looking at a Koenig Arius. They really do offer that one knife that really stands out from the crowd type of option. All right. And that's why they're so popular. And that's why so many people want them. And here's the one thing that I will say scares me a little bit. Anything that gets rare and people are noticing they're really hard to find, they start to get desperate and they start to jump on the very first one that they see on sale. And when that starts to happen, the value starts to climb. And I kind of hope that doesn't happen with these because I like the fact that they're still a good value. Okay. I know some of you are going to choke on those words when I say good value for $450, but I do think they're a good value at, brand new 525, used, somewhere between 450 and 500. I think they're really good value. If they go up to 550 to 600 or 650 to 700, you lose that. It's still a good knife, no question, but the value question really becomes much more substantial. And then I would probably steer more people toward the Riot rather than this, and say, yeah, take the other money and take your wife out for dinner or something. Okay, so there you go, guys. That's my overall take on the Koenig Arius and the reason I wanted one in my collection and the reason everyone is after one. They're just so well balanced. And yes, they're expensive, but they're made in the US. They're made extremely well. And they just, all the things that a knife is supposed to do, they take it to that just so nearly to the cusp of perfection that it really offers something special. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, I'll put that DLT link in the description box so that you can, keep track and hopefully find one over there. I'll also put a link to the Koenig Knives fan page. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.